This is actually a rather serious video, and that is why you do not see me in any sort of garb today. A few days ago on the community channel, I promised that I would do a channel update, and here I am to do that. Warning, this will be a somewhat long video because it is, I think, impossible to express the magnitude of things that I have gone through in the last few years. I spent this morning writing it up so that I could read it to you all without having to stumble over words too much because there is a lot to cover. And so here is what has been going on behind the scenes at Faye News for the last few years, which hopefully will give you some idea of why things have been inconsistent on the channel. But we are hopefully very near to returning to a regular Wednesday show. So let me just get started. So as you all may have known, Gunther, who was on the show with us, his real name is John Lewis Schweitzer, but he goes by Jack. He was living with Ion and I starting around 2019, and we were all together in Ion and I's apartment. We moved him in with us, and he lived there with us for a couple of years, entirely rent and all expenses free. I gave him the room that I used to film in. I helped him get a Washington state license. I helped him get a bank account. I helped him get on state insurance and welfare. I bought family phones for all of us, and we paid all of those bills. And eventually we bought a truck, and we paid for that too, that he was allowed to drive. And of course, we included him in the Faye News show and all of the events like Fairy Blossom and Imbolc and Samhain, all of the events that we produced in the live world. None of these things were ever good enough for him. And during this time, his behavior eventually began to escalate to include huge episodes where he would just scream at me for hours at a time. And I eventually began to become scared of him enough that I started to secretly record these screaming episodes that he would have. But I don't think that either Ion or I could have really imagined what was going to ultimately happen with that. So it was on a weekend in April in 2021. He got drunk and in an episode started screaming at me. So I texted from across the house to Ion to ask him to come over to the room. And we subtly inched this yelling session into the living room of our apartment, and then eventually out onto the back patio, where Jack was now not only screaming at me, but also at Ion and just saying a lot of very terrible things.
Clean up your fucking room, wash your fucking ass, quit acting like you're fucking don't give a shit about anything but your fucking self. And I don't want to smell you from that side of the house any fucking more, because that is not fucking okay. Go look at your fucking room. Have some goddamn fucking respect for yourself. Be a human man instead of a goddamn whatever you are, because you're not a fuck toy when I'm the only one fucking contributing to fuck all. Period. Yeah, I'm mad.
And I want to make mention of the fact that all of this is very public, what you are about to hear. I documented all of this very publicly and in a way that was safe to do so, given the fact that it did go to court, and that, there would be no libel or anything. It is all still publicly available and documented up on my Facebook, and I never have taken it down. It includes screenshots and links and court documents, all of it, and where to find it. So for those of you on YouTube who really want to go and confirm if it's the truth, you can definitely do that. There is nothing hidden about any of this. It was actually very important to me that it be publicly available because of what happened. So on that weekend, he was out on the patio yelling at us, et cetera, et cetera. And we finally got him to move back inside the house. And he then started trying to not so secretly pack a go bag. And when I didn't hear any movement from him in a minute, I asked Ion where he was, and Ion said, "I don't know. I think he grabbed the keys and left." And I said, he can't leave. He can't drive anywhere. He is drunk." And so I put my shoes on and I ran out of the apartment towards the truck, which I assumed was going to be unlocked because all the doors unlock when you unlock it. And I did see him in the truck. So I ran and I jumped in the passenger seat with the intention of getting him to not drive. He started screaming at me to get the F out of the truck. He put it in gear and he drove around the apartment parking complex parking lot to where our patio was, where he then tried to forcibly open my door and push me out of the vehicle. He was unable to do that, so he put the truck back in gear, screaming at me this whole time to get out, to just leave him alone. And he drove around the parking lot to the driveway, all the while slamming on the steering wheel. He screamed at me that if I didn't get out, he was going to drive the truck into a wall and kill me. And by the time he got to the driveway of the complex, there was an incoming car, which made him have to pull to a stop. And so he started threatening me again to get out of the truck or that he would come around and remove me bodily. So I said, okay. And he jumped out of the truck and he ran around the front, but he left the keys in the ignition. So I reached over and turned off the vehicle and took the keys out before he reached my side of the door. And so he started screaming at me that he would just go back to the house and get the spare keys. And he began running back to the apartment. I called Ion on Facebook Messenger and I told him that Jack was coming and to try to get to the keys off the rack, which were behind the front door. But as Ion was doing this, Jack plowed through the front door and encountered him, where he then proceeded to just start punching Ion in the face over and over again and in the head until Ion fell backwards through the curtain that covered the bathroom door and into the bathroom on the floor. And all of this I was able to actually hear on my phone because we had never hung up. Jack then got the keys and he ran back out of the apartment. During that time where he had run to the apartment and was punching on Ion, I had got out of the truck and got into the driver's seat and I drove out onto the road that was just adjacent and ran right along the apartment complex. And Jack, ran up the hill and to try to find where I had gone. And Ion was still on the phone with me, so I told him to call the police immediately, and he did. Jack ran out of the house and he saw the truck up on the street. He ran up the yard and then literally ran into the road and jumped onto the side of the vehicle, where he hung onto the side of the truck with one hand in the bed and one hand on the hood, and he clung to the vehicle. And this was probably around 10 o'clock at night, so it was dark outside, and he was just like a spider monkey up against the window and clinging there, while I was slowly driving down the road, terrified that something horrible was going to happen. So I was just going very slow. I mean, he's a 6'9" guy, but I was stunned that he was able to even do this thing. And so he just clung to the side of the truck, and I had locked all the doors. I drove down to the road at the end of the stoplight, and I came to a stop as slowly and carefully as I could. And when the truck finally stopped, he sort of half stumbled, half fell onto the ground, because he's drunk. And then I couldn't see him. It was dark outside. The truck was fit for him driving, not for me driving, and all the mirrors were out of whack. So I heard a scuffling in the back, and I then turned the corner, and started driving down the street. And I managed to dial 911 on my phone. And I told them that I was driving down the road and that I was afraid to stop the vehicle because I thought my boyfriend was in the back in the bed of the truck and that he was going to try to hurt me if I stopped. So 911 told me to drive to the police station where officers would meet me, and they did. 4 cops followed me into the station where they pulled Jack out of the bed of the truck and immediately arrested him there on the sidewalk. Ion gave his statement to the police officers at the apartment while I was doing the same thing at the station. Ion then went to the hospital for his wounds, and I was left with the truck and Jack's phone, which was actually my phone because I was lending it to him as part of the family package that I had. And this was when I learned how many women he had been cheating with. And when all of that was said and done, over 20 women across the country actually reached out to me or publicly made statements about how they thought they were in relationships with him, and they were otherwise doing sultry adult internet things. All of us unwitting as to what was really going on, and that he was just doing this with any female essentially that he crossed paths with and that would entreat with him. So I spent the rest of 2021 getting canceled out of all of the events that we used to work on. Canterbury Ren Fair, no more Washington Midsummer Ren Fair. To their credit, Odd Mall is one of the events that actually supported and believed me. So was Ye Mary Greenwood Renaissance Fair. But due to Jack and Joy running around telling all of these events how abusive I was, that I was keeping him prisoner in our home, and whatever else they were saying, I quite literally lost jobs and contracts with Ren Fairs because of them. The court issued, excuse me, an automatic no contact order, which is still in place between Jack and Michael, so that Jack cannot be within 1,000 feet of wherever Michael is. And we were disinvited from Washington Midsummer because of this and the restraining order that I had against him there, which is all actually in written texts that are publicly available to be read, the conversation that went on around that. It was pretty great. I did file the restraining order. He tried to dodge it with the help of Mike's Plumbing, where he was working. His job actually was hiding him out when the police were coming there to serve him his restraining order papers. And when the cops figured that out, they put that into their police report. I had to go to court a second time to get an extension on the serving time because he was dodging it and you only have a couple of weeks to serve papers. So I had to go get an extension. And when the judge read the police report and how the police said that he was being hidden out, anytime they would come around, someone else would answer the door, even though they could see him like in the back going to hide. And then they would lie and say that he wasn't there. The judge approved the police to be able to serve him his restraining order by email, which they pretty much immediately did 2 days later. And then he was now officially served and could no longer come anywhere near me. And for clarification, a no contact order and a restraining order are two different things. And a no contact order is issued by the court and can only be removed by the judge deciding to do so, which is different than a restraining order. Moving on, though, as a part of this restraining order, I was to give him back his things. That's fine. I packed them all up. I put them in front of our garage for his friends to come get for him because he could not come to where we lived. And his friends did. And I filmed them loading all of his things into their car. They were trying to stake out the apartment and they were sending me texts trying to get me to come out. And I didn't, but I did film them packing the things up. But they then tried to use that spare set of keys that Jack had given to them in order to steal the truck back from the parking lot. but they were unable to do so because I had put an anti-theft bar in the truck, so they were unable to drive it. I called the cops on them as they were doing this, and the cops arrived while they were in the process of trying to take the truck out of the parking lot, along with my neighbor who had been a witness to all of this and was watching and, keeping an eye on them to make sure they didn't start damaging things or whatever. They tried to tell the cops that not only had they not found any of his belongings outside, but that it was Jack's truck and that he had given them the keys. But I showed the paperwork that said I have legal possession of the vehicle. And I also showed the cops the video of them loading their car with Jack's things. And so the cops took the keys from them, gave the keys to me. And so now I had all the keys to the truck. And then they basically told Jack's friends to pack it up and, get on their way. The rest of 2021 after this was basically spent with me gathering evidence, writing up my case in order to secure a conviction against him. I didn't have money for a lawyer, so I had to do all of these things myself. And I did. In February of 2022, he was successfully prosecuted and pleaded guilty to a domestic violence for assault. He was able to get his jail time deferred into instead having to do an anger/substance management program for the next 9 months under probation, and the conviction did go on his record. All of this is publicly available. You can hear his conviction live in the courtroom because all of the proceedings were recorded and they are just up on King County courthouse website. So now that he was solidly out of our lives, and again, this is around February, the very beginning of February 2022, we kind of switched gears in to other members of the channel, specifically who you guys all may know as Morbid. Morbid, unbeknownst to most people, had pretty terrible behavior actually behind the scenes of the show. He was pretty terrible to me quite often on the show, constantly making fun of me for being, airheaded and stupid and a cotton candy brain, which is fine. That's a lot of these things we took, like on screen, we sort of all have our personas and we play them up. But he also did this sort of behavior off screen and constantly was ridiculing me to the rest of the cast in our private chats. I just tried to ignore it for the most part and be polite. But after Jack/Gunther left the show, Morbid just sort of stepped into his shoes and ramped up his bad behavior. Christina, who played Flora on the show, you guys may remember her. She had come to the women in our group during 2022 to tell us about her abusive situation at home. And I'm not going to go into too many details about that, but between Lady Ash and Countess Gale, Baroness Ocean Mist, you've seen all of them on Fae News, and myself, we offered her and her children a safe place to stay. We helped her find a lawyer and public services for women that were in these kinds of situations. And Ion even went to her house and helped safely move her chicken coop so that there would not be any incidences from her husband. During this time, she was courting with Morbid, which we all soon found out, but had initially not known. And at first, everybody thought it was cute and, sweet. Nobody minded. But as 2022 kind of rolled to an end and into 2023, our Imbolc Fairy Light event was approaching. Morbid picked a fight with other cast members in our private cast chat, and he threw an absolute tantrum at them about 1 week before our 2023 Imbolc Fairy Light event. He just was insulting everybody, and then he doubled down on it when you know, people tried to say, hey, you know, I don't know if you know, but these things are, you know, sound, you know, really bad. And we don't know if you're meaning this, but he just doubled down and was, you know, went full hog on it. So then after, you know, this kerfuffle happened, he went radio silent for the whole weekend and instead used Christina slash Flora as his mouthpiece to send messages to all of us in the group. And then at the end of the weekend, he did a grandstand mic drop message to all of us in our private chat and quit. There was really no effort from any of us to try to make amends or to get him back because of how horribly he had treated everybody. We just let him walk. Christina, though, who was now solidly dating him, also walked with him, but that wasn't good enough for them. So they both took as many people as they possibly could from our events, from the show, from our Patreon. They went to great efforts to sandbag our biggest festival of the year, Fairy Blossom, our midsummer show, which happens in June, by starting a pirate festival nearly on top of it, 1 week before it. They actively discouraged vendors from working with us. They tried to get them to falsely sign up, then no show, so as to inflate our numbers and make us look bad. Rolling forward into 2023, I had the opportunity to then open a physical retail space. This was probably around March/April. And I had an opportunity, this is last year now, to open a space in Fremont, a neighborhood of Seattle. About 450 square feet. It was the upstairs unit of a 2-unit building. So there was upstairs and a downstairs. And this is now where we enter the nightmare of my downstairs neighbor, who is Jennifer Dawn, and she's the owner of the Uncommon Cottage. So at first, everything was going well. It was fine. Pretty much up through about June, we were on good terms. You know, we would talk to each other. It was just, everything was fine. But then as June kind of rolled past, she began to become more abusive and frankly unhinged, and started accusing me of copying everything about her business, which was a Gothic retail gift shop, trying to steal her customers. She began harassing Raven, whom you have also seen on the show many a times. Raven was working in the store as my employee, and she would harass Raven at every opportunity, trying to tell them how they should dress and look and behave. And it got to the point with Raven that we actually filed a police report against Jennifer after one of her episodes against Raven. And this was in order to start a paper trail with her because it was it was just really so bad. She would scream up the stairs at us, and she would tell Raven that they couldn't be in the lobby greeting people, or that they couldn't be standing on the sidewalk handing out flyers on the days that we were having fairy night markets. During this time, while we didn't have video and security cameras in the store, the geocache outside my store that I had hidden, and Jennifer knew where it was. I'm not saying that she did it, but I am saying that it mysteriously went missing at least 7 times. The decorations that I had in my part of the front of the store were constantly vandalized, ripped off the tree, pulled out of my bushes, and thrown into the space next to us. She tried to get the landlord to tell me that I couldn't have signage on the sidewalk, that I couldn't hang up posters for my events or the fairy night market that I had started doing every second Saturday, once a month. She actively would walk people out the front door of the store, using her body to be between them and the stairs that led up to my store, thus preventing them from being able to go upstairs unless they were to say to her, excuse me, could I get by you? Which, nobody ever does. So she was preventing customers from coming up the stairs. And by this time we did have a video up. So I do actually have video evidence of her engaging in this behavior. She tried to strong arm me into giving her money for electric and power bills that were never even in her name. She tried to get the landlord to disallow me to play any music in my store while she blasted hers. She went through at least 9 employees in the 1 year, this one last year of her own, in 3 of which have also spoken out about her abusive behavior towards them, including not paying them their wages owed to the tune of about $800 or $900. I've had them even reach out to me personally to apologize for any misunderstandings while they were working for her, and that they had nothing against me. It was pretty crazy. On top of all of this, in August of 2023, so that's just about 1 year ago, a little over a year ago now, I was diagnosed with a very rare cancer called a germ cell carcinoma. Excuse me. Things are about to get very bad. So this is just kind of a trigger warning. If you don't think you can hear this, this is a pretty good time to stop listening. In September of last year, they operated and they took out all my girl parts, and they took out a tumor that was about the size of a Jimmy John's Subway sandwich. And I started chemo in December of 2023. And even during this time, Jennifer was harassing me and was harassing Raven to the extent that Raven frequently had to talk to their therapist and to take their anti-anxiety meds while they were working. And eventually I just told Raven that if she comes anywhere near you, do not speak to her, not a single word, just come upstairs and we'll deal with it, some other way, but just don't interact with her because it only makes her go on and be worse. She really went on and got worse on her own, and she had an absolute meltdown at her customers in December in the doorway of the building with Raven down there and myself on the platform, and she was screaming at her customers that she wished I would just hurry up and effing die. Pretty traumatizing to both Raven and I to hear, because at that point in time, I genuinely didn't even know if I was going to be alive all the way till this time this year, to this very day right now. There she was, just screaming that she wished I was dead to customers, to people that were shopping for Christmas. We caught her on video telling people that I was stealing her customers, that I was trying to steal her life and her business. She lied, telling people that I brought her abuser into the building, which I never did. And she eventually told everybody, though, in December that she was moving her business around the corner to a new store. And she started a GoFundMe. She raised $2,600 for her new location, which she never had a contract for. And she, in fact, did not move into that location at all. She eventually got a non-litigious business advice lawyer to act as a mediator between herself, the landlord, and I, in order to try to be threatening to both of us, which was an utter joke. She told everyone, including the landlord, that she was going to be out of her store at the end of December 2023. And then in January, she told the landlord that she was going to stay in business and do a reopening. And then in mid-January, she told the landlord that she was just absolutely going to be staying there, and just reopened her store like normal and continued on. During all that time, I was still going through chemo. I started chemo in December. It went until March, and Ion was running the shop on weekends. Lady Ash and Fenris and Baroness Patience and General Crew were making sure that the Fairy Night Market kept happening every second Saturday. They were helping with the vendors and the organization. I finished my regimen of chemo in March and got my follow-up test results, only to find out that the cancer had actually continued to grow back during the chemo. That is how aggressive of a cancer it was, and that it was now also in my liver. And also in the month of March, as if all of these things weren't enough, Ion and I finally found a house to rent, and we moved into a new house along with Raven, who moved in with us, so that they could actually go to college rent-free while they were living with us and wouldn't have to worry about those bills and could just focus on studying, and then kind of around the April timeframe, I had a huge pocket of dead blood that had been gathered in my abdomen that was removed. And then in May, Raven took themselves from this world, and Ion and I found them in their bedroom. And that was just a couple of days before I had to start a new and seriously harsh regimen of chemo for a second time. I had to be in the hospital for this particular regimen of chemo for 5 days at a time, followed by 10 days of daily shots to rebuild my white blood cells. I would have 1 week off, and then I would be back in the hospital for 5 more days. And my brain was pretty fuzzy most of the time, and my body was, and still is, wrecked from it. I have bad neuropathy in my feet and some in my fingers, just a bunch of other stuff that is boring to hear, but is hard. So toward the end of June, I was still in chemo, but I managed to get my doctors to agree to schedule my June chemo around Fairy Blossom Festival's 10th anniversary. That's this year. That's June of this year. We were only able to do a downsized version of the festival because I just wasn't able to handle the workload and the stress of a full-scale event. And so nevertheless, the show did go on, and with the help of everyone around me, who I'll never be able to pay back for everything, we did a community ceremony for Raven, which was really beautiful, but you will not see them on the show anymore, and that is why. So back at the store, Jennifer was now saying that she was going to be moving into a new location in Queen Anne, and this turned out to actually be true this time. And by July, she was packing her store and slowly moving it over to her new Queen Anne location. And the last time I saw her in the building was toward the end of July after she was all closed up. And she confronted me in the lobby of the building to tell me that I couldn't put my sign in there because it was her space, even though she had not paid rent for this month at all. And that she tried to pick a fight with me before locking her doors and heading across the street to the bar. It was ridiculous. I finished my last round of chemo at the end of July, and then on August 30th of this year, so now just a couple months ago, I had a second laparoscopic surgery to remove the tumor that had regrown in my pelvis and some tumor bits that were in the left side of my liver. This was largely actually a successful surgery. They got all of the tumor in my pelvis, and they got the 3 bigger tumor bits in my left liver. Pathology from these showed that the tumors were actually dead, and at least the pelvis tumor was dead and no longer cancerous. They unfortunately also found tons of tiny little tumor spots on the right side of my liver. They were too small to zap in the surgery, so they had to leave them there. And at the end of this month, I will be having a PET scan to see whether or not the tumors are also dead, because they are the same cancer that was in my pelvis, or whether or not they're alive. If they are alive, it's possible that I could be looking at having to have 50% of my liver removed. But our fingers crossed that isn't the case, and we're not to that point yet. So Backing up, though, to the beginning of September, where quite literally the day after my laparoscopic surgery, I was released from the hospital. I went straight to my shop and I worked. The landlord offered me Jennifer's space when she vacated, and I agreed to take it and expand my store. And during the first week of September, since I wasn't supposed to be doing anything because of surgery, my dad and my brother and a whole host of my friends came and helped me move my entire store downstairs, which I could not have done without any of them. All of the furniture and everything into the new space downstairs. I started a Kickstarter to raise money and to buy additional store displays. I now have 2 extra rooms that I am expanding into, and so I need to, fill those spaces. one of the rooms is going to become a gaming room that is rentable, and that also I plan to set up to be able to stream from. And then the other room is going to become a reading kind of room. So, but by the second week of September, I was open and functional again in the store, if only on the weekends. And I've just been slowly all through September getting it in as much order as I could without wrecking myself post surgery. The Kickstarter has finished, but I did turn on the option for people to still be able to contribute post Kickstarter. So that's still a thing that's out there. But just to add another little punch to everything going on, we also learned just a few days ago that the frequent guest member that we used to have on the show, Justinian, you guys may remember him. He was the jackalope that has been on the channel many times in the past. Justinian passed away, and they were always a very kind person, and they were wonderful to work with. We all loved them, and we hope that they're traveling in a better place now. That pretty much brings us to the now, and I'm in my new store. The Kickstarter money is in. We're going to have a 6-foot gnome carved out of wood to put in front of the store. And we plan to be starting the show again here very soon. So please, if you've made it this far, thank you guys for listening, and, stay tuned. I have to go be Fairy Queen at the Vegas Ren Fair this weekend. And then when I come back, I think I'm going to try to set up, and hopefully in the next couple weeks, we'll be back on air, maybe every other week to start, but hopefully every week again very soon. You can still find us on our Discord. It's up, it's active, it's live. Or you can find us on Patreon. We're all still around. We're still doing all of our things. We just haven't been here on YouTube quite so much. And now you all know why. So thank you to everybody that has been supportive. That's a lot of you. I hope that we will continue to see you around in the future. I don't want to leave this on a sad or a down note, so I'm going to just cut in a little piece of video here of my kitten, who was born just a couple weeks ago. Enjoy some kitten videos, you guys. I love you all, and thank you for just being out here and, being you. Okay.
You just want to do the recording?
We both are. I think that's fine. I don't...
Okay.
Okay, so he's been very upset for a while.
John
has. Okay. And he's been yelling at Michael and I for a couple of hours now, tonight, since okay. About 6:40.
Has he been drinking? He kind of seemed a little bit drunk.
Let me get to the thing. So he was having a meltdown, and
what about?
Everything, like all of the things. Let me finish, and then please, if you have questions, I'll answer them all, but let me finish. And Okay, so he's having a meltdown, and so he wanted to be left alone, so he went in his room. We were in the garage, and we were cleaning out a spare refrigerator, an extra refrigerator. I go into the house to go to the bathroom. John comes in to get his teeth from the bathroom, and I was like, "Are you gonna eat dinner?" And he said, or I said, "Are you gonna eat something? Because it's late." And he's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna eat dinner." And he's like, and at this point, he's like, "I have been drinking." That's what he said. And I was like, okay. So he goes into his room, and he's like, then I got up to leave through the front door, and I passed his bedroom door, and I said, "Why do you have your coat on?" And he's like, "Oh, because I picked it up off the floor." And I was like, "And your hat?" I was like, "Are you leaving the house?" And he said, "No, I'm just cleaning my room." Well, then, I don't know where I was. Like, maybe I had gone back in the house and was talking to Michael or something, and I got a text, and he said, "I'm gonna go stay at Hayden's house," who was a coworker of his, and good night. And I sent a text, and I said, "Are you leaving?" And like, he wasn't in the house, like, because he had slammed out the front door, and so I knew he wasn't in the house, and I was like, and I said, "Michael," I was like, "Oh my God, he's drinking, and I think he's in the truck." So I came out, and he did not see me approaching the truck, so I opened the door of the truck, and I got in the truck. And then he started ranting at me that he wanted me to get out of the truck. And I said, "I'm not going to get out of the truck. You've been drinking. You can't be driving. This is not okay." And so he put the truck in drive. He drove around our parking lot, and he went up to the driveway like he was gonna leave. And he had tried to open the door and push me out, but I closed the door and locked it, so he couldn't do that. And so he said, "If you don't get out of the truck, I'm gonna get you out of the truck." And I said, "Okay." So he jumps out of his door, and he comes around to my side, and I grabbed the keys and I turned them off of the truck, and I pulled them out of the ignition.
Okay.
And I was in the truck still, and he was like, "Well, I'll just go back to the house and get my other set of keys." And so I was like, you know, so I didn't know what to do. And I said, "Well, I'm not getting out of the truck." So he left to go back to the house, and so I called Michael, and I was like, "Michael, I think you need to physically stop him from doing whatever he's about to do. He's coming your way. Like, please don't let him do whatever." So now all I know from this point on is that he left to go back to the house. I came around to the driver's side of the truck. I started the truck, and I was just gonna park it on the road, so I just drove down the street to the little turnaround. And as I was coming back, Michael called me. I answered it, and I was like, "Do I need to call 911? And Michael was like, "Yes." He literally just punched me in the face like 7 or 8 times. And I was like, and then at that point in time, I was passing the driveway to our apartment when I said that. And John came out across the street and started banging on the truck, and the doors were locked. And so he jumped onto the side of the truck and was hanging on it while I was driving very slowly down the road. And I'm like, "You're gonna have to call 911 because he's literally hanging on the side of the truck." And then so I hung up, and I immediately just called 911 with him hanging on the side of the truck. Well, I got to the stoplight at 7th
and 100th.
Yes. And there's the little light, and I had to turn right. So I'm coming to a stop, and he falls off onto the ground, and he gets up, and because he had hung on to the door handle, and he gets up, and I could see him trying to crawl into the back of the truck, and he did not speed off because I was afraid I would hurt him if I did. So I just went.
Want him to get hurt, obviously.
I just went really slow, and I thought that he had successfully got in the back of the truck, and I was like, okay, if I keep driving, then he can't do anything. And so I turned, and I went out, and I had called 911, and I went to the mall parking lot where I could drive around real slow with no traffic, but then I didn't see him moving, and so I was like, "Oh my God, what if he's back there and he's really hurt?" And I didn't know, and they just said, "Please go to the police department, and we'll just have somebody come." And then that's how I got here, and now I'm talking to you.
I followed you in here. Okay.
That is how it happened.
After John had apparently punched Michael in the face a bunch of times, did you ever see Michael?
No. Well, he was on my video chat, but I was driving, so
So it's not like you could tell if he was pretty injured or anything like that. You didn't see any injuries on him?
No.
Okay. All right.
His face looked really red, but I was driving, so maybe it was red because he was
Right.
exasperated. Maybe it was
Hard
red
to-
because he was punched. I don't know.
Hard to say because you were on the video.
Right.
Okay. All right.
Oh my God, this is such a mess.
And he said he was planning on going to some guy named Hayden's house
Hayden is one of his co-workers.
that lives close by, or what?
I don't know. I know very little about where Hayden lives or much about him other than that he's Australian. And
Oh. Okay.
I've only met him once at a company
we're gonna
party.
figure out what our resolution is here. Did he seem drunk to you, like, from the very beginning of this, like, I guess, argument and stuff?
No, from the very, very beginning he wasn't, because I was with him, but
Yeah.
he got angry at one point and he said, I'm just gonna go for a drive, and he went to Safeway and he bought a bottle of vodka, but I don't, which I mean I know because that's what he came home with.
Right.
And Michael can verify, and
Yeah.
it wasn't. I don't know though, because before, I don't know if he had alcohol that was previously in his car, because even before he left for Safeway, I don't know.
He was acting a little different.
Yes, but I don't know if it was because he's like having a breakdown.
Yeah, I hear you.
I don't know. I feel like he's never done anything like this, and I'm just so freaked out. This is crazy.
Would you be able to write a statement about kind of some of the stuff that you told me, and just kind of the overall, like, what happened today and what Michael told you? I'm particularly focused on kind of this evening's events, especially when John allegedly punched Michael, and like what you know about those circumstances.
I know very little about those circumstances.
Yeah,
but
I know.
I can write what I do know.
Yeah, if you're willing to just write basically what you told me, I think that would be really helpful for us.
What are you guys doing with him?
So that we're trying to figure that out. I can tell you right now that if he did in fact punch Michael, then he's gonna have to go to jail tonight. Okay. Alrighty?
No, not very alright.
What's that? What'd you say?
It's not very alright.
Okay. Well, can you do me a favor and just shut off the truck since I got officers standing behind you for now? Thank you so much.